everyone's suffering is slightly different, but if you zoom out far enough, it's pretty much all the same to some degree.
Yeah.
If you had a young person come to you and they were, I don't know, they don't even have to be young, 16 years old, maybe 30, maybe 45, and you had to give them some broad advice on how to suffer less for the remainder of their life, advice would you give them?
We've reached a stage in our evolution where people don't ask these questions. They only know that they suffer and they want an immediate solution, which is, something like an antidepressant or whatever. And that's what we've created with a materialistic interpretation of the universe. Wisdom traditions tell us we suffer because, in fact, in the Eastern wisdom tradition, we suffer 5 causes. Not knowing who we are, number 1. Not knowing the nature of reality. No isolated self. Clinging and grasping at experience, which is ephemeral. Experience is ephemeral. It's transient. You can't catch it.
Like regret or...
Even this experience,
okay.
If I asked you,
hold on to it,
you can't hold on to this experience. If I asked you what happened to your childhood, you'd say it's a dream. Or if I asked you what happened to last night, it's a dream. What happened to this morning, it's a dream. What happens to these words, by the time you hear them, they don't exist.
And me trying to cling on to that. So
we try to cling on that. Then we also recoil from that if it's unpleasant. We confuse ourselves with our ego identity, which is socially induced, and we fear death. Those are the 5 causes of suffering. So wisdom traditions say you have to figure out what is reality. And when you figure out what is reality, and you can't do that at 16 unless you have been groomed, in wisdom traditions, you were groomed for wisdom. And that started what we call self-education, which is what yoga is, by the way. Yoga means union with the self. Misinterpretation of yoga is this is just the physical postures. But the 8 limbs of yoga are all intended to find your true self. So there are principles of social intelligence, emotional intelligence, physical posture, breathing techniques, withdrawal of the senses, focused awareness, meditation, transcendence. Once you get to these last 3 aspects of yoga, transcendence is the key. You find out who you really are. The self which knows the self, not bamboozled by social constructs.
So let's go through those 5 things. Number 1.
Not knowing reality. Reality is not local, it's infinite.
So what do I need to understand then to avoid that form of suffering? I need to understand that it's not localized, and therefore that means...
that you are infinite. You're at one level.
I'm everything and nothing.
You're everything and nothing, and actually you experience love. Love not as a sentiment, but the ineffable interconnectedness with all that exists. People have those experiences with psychedelics these days. Or you can actually give somebody an experience like that with even VR, because we are already in a VR.
Number 2?
Number 2, clinging, grasping that which is ungraspable. Every experience is ungraspable. So the awareness of an experience is not the experience. The awareness of a thought is not a thought. The awareness of a thought is independent of the thought. If you identify with the awareness instead of the thought, which is like a cloud going through the sky, you don't either attach yourself to it or you don't identify with it. It takes training. So, and in the Rig Veda, let noble thoughts come to me from every side, because your thoughts are not your production. Your thoughts are socially constructed and they recycle through you, and yet we identify with them. So number 2 is identifying with that which is ephemeral, transient, ungraspable. Number 3,
on number two, we need to not attach, not associate with thoughts, not associate with experiences in order to be free from suffering.
You can associate with them, but you're not attached or identified to them. You can associate with thoughts.
So if you've had a trauma in your early life or something, or you've been through something not so good, or you've been dumped by your boyfriend.
And then we would identify with that. And actually, that epigenetically, by the way, that's intergenerational. Now we know that, in the Holocaust, for example, during the invasion of the Netherlands by Nazi Germany, there was famine amongst the Jews. And now 3 generations, 4 generations after that, the people's descendants who were traumatized, they have diabetes because somewhere in their body there's a memory of famine. So they're holding on to carbohydrates, they have insulin resistance, etc. If you take a mouse and you expose it to a smell that it likes, for example, lavender, and then you give it a mild electrical shock, for 7 generations, the mice will be fearful of that particular smell. I've been to a cow farm in Hawaii where they used to have electrical wires as fences, mild electrical shocks. Now they don't have the wires. But the descendants of those cows that were traumatized, they won't cross over that fence, or they won't cross over where the border was. So this is another mystery. Where is memory? Most people, if you ask them, where is memory, they'll point to the brain. If I asked you, what did you have for breakfast today? What did you have for breakfast today?
That's a really good question. I had a salad
Okay.
with some chicken and avocado.
So now, where was that memory before I asked you the question? There's nowhere in the brain you can point out that memory was, but as soon as I ask you the question, then neural networks go fire.
Yeah.
But where is the memory retrieved from? The only place is consciousness, but consciousness can't be localized.
You know, when people get brain injuries, car crashes, they lose their memory sometimes.
Yeah, so radio is damaged, you don't listen to the music.
Doesn't that prove that it's in the brain somewhere?
Is Shakespeare on your movie screen or your television set? Is actually anything you read in the book, is the author in the book? It's that, you confuse the instrument with the user of the instrument. The fault of the instrument is not a reflection on the user of the instrument.
Shakespeare and that would live on like the CD or like the
That's
video
right.
cassette.
Yeah, but where is that mind that localized in the CD?
In the brain somewhere, isn't it?
No, the brain is just like your CD set.
Okay.
What happens in the brain is called the neural correlates of experience, NCE. There's, as I said earlier, there's no experience in the brain. That's why you can put a knife through it. The brain has no self-awareness.
When you think about some of these neurological diseases like dementia, Alzheimer's, what does that present evidence for in terms of, I guess a lot of people aren't really clear at the moment where Alzheimer's and dementia starts or what's causing it.
Alzheimer's, now we know, is due to accumulation of a substance called amyloid in the brain. So there are 40 genes that predispose you for Alzheimer's, of which 3 are probably fully penetrant, which means they predict the disease because that's genetic determinism. The rest are related to things like lack of sleep or inflammation or stress or a diet that causes inflammation or lack of unregulated biological rhythms, etc. So there are identifiable causes for Alzheimer's. But again, Alzheimer's and these neurological diseases, all diseases like that, we are talking about 2 different things. We're talking about consciousness as a fundamental reality, and then we're talking about the instrument that we call the brain. Now, I should say to you, though, that what I'm saying is not necessarily accepted by mainstream science, but mainstream science cannot answer the hard problem of consciousness or where experience happens, and is not interested. Right now, the 2 most promising things in medical science, well, 3 or 4 are, one is what we call gene editing, CRISPR, so you'll be able to cut and paste genes through the way you cut and paste emails. But that'll affect maybe 5-6% of genetic determinism. The rest is lifestyle, epigenetics. So that's where we are in medical science. And with machine learning and artificial intelligence, I think we'll be able to predict disease and make it more, everything will be more personalized, predictable, preventable in the future. But we are talking about two different things right now. We're talking about biology, and we're talking about the hard problem of consciousness.
We'll get on to the pillars of well-being. Wanted to finish those 5 points of suffering.
Yes. They're called the 5 kleshas.
Kleshas.
Yeah, in Sanskrit. So that
we were on number 3, right?
Recoiling from experiences that we interpret as unpleasant.
Okay.
But see, once again, the awareness of the experience is not the experience. So once you can observe the experience, you're free of the experience. You don't identify with the experience. Oh, that's an interesting thought. Passing by the screen of my consciousness like a cloud in the sky. I'm not the cloud, I'm the sky. I'm not the play on the screen, I'm the screen.
So an example would be, so the sentence is recoiling from experiences that
unpleasant.
They're unpleasant. So give me an example. Someone in my life, someone in my family dies.
Yeah. So obviously you're scared, right? Because you identify with the experience, but everybody dies. I mean, trillions of people have died. You're not the only one who's going to die. And then what dies is another mystery. The body dies. The seeds of memory recycle, because what is memory but it's information, and that's recycled through collective consciousness. So as soon as you're born, you're already born into an interpreted world, a world with memory, a world with imagination, a world with non-local consciousness that is now localizing through your brain as this process that you call the body. The body-mind is a process in consciousness. Consciousness itself is not subject to time. Only, time is an experience we have as soon as we have subject-object split. So as soon as there's subject-object split, which is artificial, in nature is a unified activity, then time is born. The experience of time is born.
So in your life, if someone dies, God forbid, do you suffer?
You grieve, which is a natural process, and it has a life cycle. You don't hold on to it. In fact, you embrace it. You embrace anytime you recoil or deny, resistance creates even more stress. So what we call stress is resistance to existence in the moment. Okay. If you don't resist experience in the moment, it's passing by.
So something really bad happens at work. I get a really bad, my boss tells me I'm fired. The mindset required to avoid suffering in that case is to take the news.
It's not a mindset.
It's a
step in awareness. The awareness of the mind is not the mind. Who is it or what is it that knows a thought? That is what you need to shift to.
Okay.
Once you shift from the experience to the awareness in which the experience is happening, you're independent of it. And that's what actually those 8 limbs of yoga are about. It's a process, a shift in identity. We started with that, a shift in identity from your assumed self to your fundamental self, which is infinite, which is without cause, which is not subject to birth and death, which is spaceless, timeless, incomprehensible, infinite, irreducible, and fundamental.
It feels almost like I'm stepping out of myself and looking at myself.
Correct. Looking at the projection of yourself.
The projection of myself, would make more sense.
You're looking at the projection of yourself.
Which is very hard to do.
You're looking at your avatar.
And it's very hard to do because we are increasingly becoming avatars, especially with things like social media.
Yeah.
We're being reinforced. Like, I have 2 million followers or 1 million followers or 500,000 followers. They're following my avatar.
So we don't know who we are. You're confused yourself with the avatar. And the battle is all between avatars wanting importance.
How does one resign from that battle and take back my peace?
Actually, the opposite of that is creativity. The creativity is the opposite of determinism. If you don't want to be a biological robot or an algorithm, which is what we are now, we are biological algorithms, biological robots. And that's, by the way, part of our evolution. It's not something, all animals, but the animals have an advantage. They live in the present moment. But you and I have an imagination that can see into the future, that can even look at death, as the culmination of this life experience. We regret the past. We anticipate the future. We're never in the present, when this is the only place we are right now is the present. There is no way to escape it, but in our imagination, we escape it. So the worst use of imagination is stress. The best use of imagination is creativity. Creativity is a disruption in the algorithm. It's a discontinuity, fundamental creativity, not, usual innovation like iPhone 13 instead of iPhone 12 with a better camera. That's not what creativity is. Creativity is a death and a resurrection. It's a death of context, meaning, relationship, and story, and a new meaning, relationship, and story. That's fundamental creativity. That's Einstein coming up with the theory of relativity, or the quantum physicists breaking every rule that we knew in Newtonian physics, or a great piece of art, Beethoven's Fifth. These are original creativity is a disruption in the algorithm.
To this idea of my avatar getting into this sort of avatar war with other avatars, my antidote to that is my own creativity.
Your own creativity. Every moment you have a choice to repeat the past or be a pioneer of creativity of the future. And that happens, by the way. It happens individually. It happens collectively. We change worldviews. The world is not flat anymore. The ground is not stationary anymore. The world is not material anymore. Every technology that you use is based on the new idea that the essential nature of the physical world is it's not physical. If I could see you as you really are, I'd see a huge emptiness with a few scattered dots and spots and some random electrical discharges. And at the most fundamental level, there are no boundaries. Boundaries are perceptual. So when we experience the spiritual ecstasy, which is ineffable, there are no boundaries. That's why people in near-death experience, people with psychedelic experience, people with peak experiences, athletes, musical performance, any break from ordinary reality is ineffable and healing, actually. That's why the recent resurgence in psychedelics is very interesting, because it takes you away from your identity of being squeezed into the volume of a body in the span of a lifetime.
And point number 4, the 5 points of suffering. Point number 4.
Point number 4, confusing your selfie with yourself, your ego identity.
We've talked about that. And number 5 is death.
Death. But all of them have one solution. First one, find out who you are.